My future sister-in-law announced that my bakery was just a cute hobby, and that for the wedding cake, they needed a real professional. So I smiled and let her search, knowing she was about to discover that every top baker in the city was already working for me. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The scent of roasted chicken and rosemary should have been comforting, but it felt suffocating, trapping me at a dinner table that had quickly become a tribunal. On one side was my fiancé, Daniel, his expression carefully neutral. On the other was his older sister, Victoria, her smile as sharp and polished as the silverware she wielded with surgical precision. The topic was our wedding, but the subject was my inadequacy. The venue is booked, the invitations are designed, and I've spoken with a florist who can achieve the aesthetic we discussed, Victoria said, addressing Daniel as if I weren't there. Her tone was that of a CEO delivering a quarterly report, brisk, efficient, and devoid of any real joy. Which brings us to the cake. Her eyes, a cool and assessing gray, finally landed on me. "Leela, dear," she began, the endearment a tiny, poisoned dart. "Daniel tells me you have a little online bake shop. That's wonderful. It's so important to have a hobby." My hands, which had been resting in my lap, clenched into fists. My bakery, Leela's Flower Garden, was not a hobby. It was the culmination of a decade of relentless work. It was 4 a.m. alarms to feed my sourdough starters, burned fingers from pulling out just one more batch of financiers, and endless nights spent sketching designs on parchment paper. It was the business that paid my mortgage and funded my dreams. It was my heart, rendered in flour and sugar. "It's a bit more than a hobby, Victoria," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Daniel shifted in his seat, sensing the temperature drop. "Leela is incredibly talented, Vic. Her cakes are amazing." "Oh, I'm sure they're perfectly cute," Victoria conceded, waving a dismissive hand. "Perfect for a bake sale or a little birthday party, but this is our family's event. This is Daniel's wedding. It needs to be handled by a real professional. I was thinking we could book Chef Anton Dubois. His work is practically art, and having his name on the menu would add a certain level of prestige." The words "real professional" echoed in the silent dining room. They hung in the air, thick and stinging, a direct assault on my identity. I had poured my entire being into my craft. I had studied under masters in France, won regional baking awards that I never boasted about, and built a clientele that valued my work enough to book me months, sometimes years, in advance. But in Victoria's world, a world of brand names and public perception, my quiet success meant nothing because it wasn't loud enough for her to hear. I looked at Daniel, my heart pleading with him to understand, to defend me, to shut this down. He saw the hurt in my eyes, I know he did. He opened his mouth, a protest forming on his lips. "Vic, I don't think that's fair. Leela is a professional." "Daniel, please be realistic." Victoria cut him off smoothly, her voice laced with a patronizing pity meant for me. "This isn't about what's fair. It's about what's appropriate. We have an image to maintain. We can't have guests asking who made the cake and have to mumble something about a home-based business. It sounds cheap." Cheap, my work, which I poured so much love and integrity into, was being called cheap. Daniel's defense faltered. He was a man who detested conflict, especially with his sister, whose approval he had sought his entire life. He deflated, running a hand through his hair. "I just want a cake that tastes good," he mumbled, a feeble retreat. That was it. He had waved the white flag. The sting of Victoria's condescension was sharp, but the pain of Daniel's capitulation was a deep, throbbing ache. He loved me, I knew that. But in that moment, he had chosen peace over partnership. He had let his sister draw a line in the sand between my hobby and her prestige, and he had refused to cross it. A cold, quiet resolve began to form in my chest, displacing the hurt. I unfurled my fists. I looked at Victoria, whose face was alight with the triumph of a battle won. I offered her a small, serene smile. "You're absolutely right, Victoria," I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear. Every head at the table turned toward me, surprised by my easy concession. The wedding should be perfect. You should absolutely hire the best professional you can find. Victoria's smile widened, victorious. I'm so glad you understand, dear. Daniel looked at me, a mixture of relief and confusion on his face. He didn't understand the steel that was now linen. Gee, my spine. He didn't see the plan that was already blooming in my mind, a complex and layered creation, much like one of my own cakes. They had dismissed my work. They had belittled my passion. But they had forgotten one crucial thing, a secret ingredient I held in reserve. They thought my bakery was small. They had no idea that I was about to become the biggest name in the city. The humiliation was a bitter pill, but I knew the vindication would be sweet. The car ride home was a cocoon of tense silence. Daniel drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, occasionally glancing at me as if I were a delicate piece of blown glass that might shatter at the slightest vibration. I stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and silver, my mind a whirlwind. The calm I had projected at the dinner table was a facade, a thin layer of hardened sugar over a still molten core of hurt. When we got back to our apartment, the silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Daniel finally broke it, his voice tentative. Leela, are you okay? I turned to face him, my arms crossed over my chest. I'm not sure, Daniel. Are we okay? Of course we are, he said, stepping closer. Look, I'm sorry about tonight. Victoria, she gets carried away. She's just obsessed with appearances. She called my life's work a cute hobby, Daniel. She called it cheap. And you just sat there. I tried, he protested, his voice rising in frustration. I said you were a professional. What else was I supposed to do? Flip the table? Get into a screaming match with my sister 2 months before our wedding? I don't know, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Maybe you could have said, Victoria, stop. You're insulting the woman I'm going to marry, and I won't have it. Maybe you could have acted like we were a team. The truth of the words hit him. He deflated, the fight going out of him. He sank onto the sofa and buried his face in his hands. You're right, he mumbled into his palms. You're right, I'm sorry, I froze. She's been like that my whole life, and I defaulted to the path of least resistance. It was cowardly. I'm so sorry, Leela. I sat down next to him, the anger inside me softening as I looked at his genuinely miserable expression. I knew he loved me. I knew his sister was his blind spot, a complicated dynamic forged over decades of her being the overbearing but fiercely protective older sibling after their mother passed away. I know you're sorry, Daniel, I said softly. But this can't happen again. When we're married, we are a unit. My battles are your battles and your battles are mine. We have to be a united front, especially against people like her. He lifted his head, his eyes full of remorse. I promise, it will never happen again. I'll call her tomorrow and tell her she was out of line. No, I said, a new resolve clicking into place. Don't do that. Let her do what she wants. Let her try to hire Chef Anton Dubois. Let her call every big name in the city. Daniel looked confused. But why? I thought you were hurt. I am hurt, I admitted. But I'm also a businesswoman, and Victoria just presented me with a very interesting business opportunity. A small smile played on my lips. My gaze drifted to my home office, where a thick, legally binding contract lay on my desk. It was the reason I had been so busy and distracted for the past month, the secret I was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. I had been planning to tell Daniel this week, to celebrate with him. But now, the contract felt like something else entirely. It felt like a weapon, a very powerful, very precise weapon. What are you talking about? Daniel asked, studying my face. I simply shook my head. Just trust me. Victoria wants a professional. Let's see what happens when she tries to book one. Inside my mind, I repeated the thought that had been my silent mantra all evening, the one that was now a promise of what was to come. She has no idea who she is dealing with. She saw a small-time baker in an apron dusted with flour. She was about to meet the woman who held the entire city's pastry scene in the palm of her hand. To understand Victoria, you have to understand her world. It was a world built on surfaces. Her apartment was a minimalist masterpiece of glass and chrome, featured in a local design magazine. Her car was a silent, German-engineered status symbol. Her job in public relations was to literally manage the public image of luxury brands, ensuring their surfaces remained polished and desirable at all times. Substance was secondary to perception. Authenticity was a liability if it didn't photograph well. My world, on the other hand, was one of substance. It was the precise molecular structure of glute, the finicky temperament of French macarons, the rich, earthy scent of real vanilla bean. My bakery, Leela's Flower Garden, was born in a cramped apartment kitchen with a second ND stand mixer and a fierce determination to create something real. For 2 years, I worked a full-time office job to pay the bills, baking from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., catching a few hours of sleep, and then starting all over again. My first customers were coworkers who bought my surplus cupcakes. Their praise gave me the courage to start an Instagram account. The photos were amateurish at first, taken on my phone in bad lighting, but the quality of the baking shone through. Slowly, word of mouth spread. An order for a birthday party led to a referral for a small wedding. That wedding's caterer was so impressed they put me on their preferred vendor list. Within 5 years, I had quit my office job, leased a commercial kitchen space, and hired 2 part-time assistants. I was still online only, meaning I didn't have a retail storefront. It was a business model that kept my overheads low and allowed me to focus on high-end custom orders. But to someone like Victoria, online only was synonymous with not real. If she couldn't walk into a brick-and-mortar shop with a fancy sign, it didn't exist on her map of the world. Her condescension wasn't new. From the moment Daniel introduced us, she had treated me like a curious pet project. "Oh, you bake?" she'd said at our first meeting, her tone dripping with the kind of false enthusiasm one might use for a child's crayon drawing. How utterly charming. Over the years, the digs became more pointed. When I won the Pastry Chef of the Year award from a prestigious local food magazine, she'd remarked at a family gathering, "It's amazing what these little publications will do for ad revenue, isn't it?" When I mentioned I was developing a line of gluten-free products, she'd sighed dramatically and said, "I do hope you're not planning on serving any of that chalky stuff at the wedding." Daniel always saw it as Victoria being Victoria. He saw her sharp edges as a form of protection, a personality flaw to be managed and tolerated. But I saw it as a deliberate and consistent effort to diminish me, to ensure I knew my place in her family's hierarchy, somewhere far below her. The ultimate irony was that Victoria's entire career was built on the kind of narrative I was living. She was paid a fortune to help brands appear authentic, to tell stories of humble beginnings and passionate founders. My story was the real deal, yet she couldn't see it. She was so blinded by logos and price tags that she couldn't recognize genuine value when it was sitting right across the dinner table, about to marry her brother. This time, however, was different. This time, she wasn't just insulting me, she was interfering with my wedding and trying to sideline me from one of the most significant moments of my life. And this time, I wasn't just a small business owner with a good reputation. I was something more, something she could never have anticipated. I was a kingmaker. The Monday morning after that disastrous dinner, I didn't go to my kitchen. Instead, I went to a sleek downtown office with panoramic city views. I was greeted by a friendly assistant who offered me sparkling water before showing me into a conference room. A few moments later, Eleanor Vance walked in, her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Eleanor was a legend. She was the matriarch of modern pastry in our country, a celebrated author, and the lead judge on the great national baking show. To the world, she was an icon. To me, she was a mentor. We had met a few years prior when she'd anonymously ordered one of my signature lavender honey cakes for a private event. She'd been so impressed that she had sought me out, taking me under her wing and offering guidance that was more valuable than any culinary school education. It was Alina who had encouraged me to lean into my unique, ingredient-focused style. It was Alina who had taught me how to scale my business without sacrificing quality. And it was Alina who, a month ago, had presented me with the opportunity of a lifetime. "Leela," she said, her voice warm but businesslike as she took a seat opposite me, "I trust you've had a chance to review the final contract." "I have," I said, sliding the thick document across the polished table. "It's breathtaking, Alina." The contract was with the parent company that produced the Great National Baking Show. My quiet, consistent success and my growing influence as a food blogger had put me on their radar. They were looking for a new kind of sponsor for the upcoming season, not a giant corporate brand, but an authentic, independent creator who embodied the show's spirit. They wanted a face that was relatable yet aspirational. Thanks to Alina's powerful recommendation, they had chosen me. The deal was massive. In exchange for a significant financial investment, one I could now afford thanks to years of frugal living and savvy investing, Leela's Flower Garden would be named the official sponsor of the show. My logo would be on every episode. I would be featured in a series of digital shorts. And most importantly for my current situation, the sponsorship came with a mandate to foster local baking talent in my home city where the season was set to be filmed. "The Community Bake Initiative was my idea," Alina explained, tapping a clause in the contract. "We want you to be a patron, to use a portion of the sponsorship funds to elevate the entire local scene. I've taken the liberty of drawing up a list of the top 20 pastry chefs and bakeries in the city. The idea is for you to host and fund a 2-week series of exclusive workshops and collaborative events right here leading up to the show's premiere." She slid another piece of paper across the table. It was a list of names. And there, at the very top, was Chef Anton Dubois. Below him were the owners of the Gilded Spoon, Patisserie Elise, the Sugar Architect, every single name Victoria would have on her dream list of real professionals. This was my trap. "The timing is impeccable," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. Alina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, I thought the premiere was still 3 months away." "It is," I said, "but my wedding is in 2 months, and my future sister-in-law has just informed me that I am not professional enough to bake my own cake. She's currently on a mission to hire someone from this exact list." A flicker of understanding, followed by pure, unadulterated delight, danced in Alina's eyes. She leaned back in her chair, a low chuckle rumbling in her chest. "Oh, Leela, that is poetic, truly poetic. So what is your plan?" "The plan," I said, my voice filled with newfound confidence, "is to execute this contract. Immediately. I want to book every single one of them, for the entire 2-week period leading up to my wedding. They will be contractually obligated to participate in the Leela's Flower Garden Community Bake Initiative. They will be so busy creating content and teaching workshops for me that they won't have time to bake a single cupcake for anyone else." Alina's chuckle turned into a hearty laugh. "Victoria's going to hit a wall, a very expensive, very well-baked wall." "That's the idea," I confirmed. "She wants a professional. She's about to find out they all work for me." For the next week, I was a woman on a mission. I wasn't piping frosting, I was directing my lawyer. I wasn't kneading dough, I was negotiating contracts. One by one, my assistant and I called the names on the list. We presented them with a generous offer, a hefty stipend and a chance to be featured in a nationally televised event, all funded by a mysterious, secret client who wished to remain anonymous for now. No one said no. The allure of the Great National Baking Show was too strong. By the end of the week, I had every single one of Victoria's dream bakers locked into an ironclad exclusivity agreement. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the screaming to start. The first sign of trouble came via a text from Daniel a few days later. Daniel, well, Victoria called Chef Anton Dubois. He said he's unavailable. Booked solid for a private corporate event. I smiled at my phone. Me, oh, what a shame. Who is she going to try next? Daniel, the Gilded Spoon, I think. She's not worried. says it's a good thing. Dubois is probably overrated anyway. The call about the gilded spoon came 2 days after that. I was in my kitchen, perfecting a new recipe for a rosewater and pistachio sponge, when Daniel called, his voice a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "She struck out again," he said without preamble. "The gilded spoon is booked. Same reason, some big, exclusive event they can't talk about." "Wow, this mysterious event sounds very popular," I said, feigning innocence as I folded delicate petals of crystallized rose into the batter. "You have no idea," Daniel sighed. "Victoria is starting to get tense. She spent an hour on the phone with her wedding planner, demanding they find someone. The planner said it's highly unusual for so many top-tier vendors to be unavailable at the same time. Maybe it's a sign," I suggested sweetly, "that I should just make the cake." Daniel laughed. "I said that. She threw a throw pillow at me. She said it's a matter of principle now. She will not be defeated by the city's social calendar." Over the next week, it became a running theme. Each evening, Daniel would give me the daily Victoria report. Patisserie Elise, booked. The Sugar Architect, unavailable. The Confectioners Club, regretfully, they were also committed to a private sponsorship. With each rejection, Victoria's confident facade began to crack. Her texts to Daniel became more frantic. Her tone, he reported, was shifting from imperious to indignant. It was a citywide conspiracy against her wedding. It was unprofessional for these bakers to commit to one client. Oh, holy. It was, she declared dramatically, an attack on the very institution of marriage. The turning point came when her wedding planner, a high-strung woman named Patris, called Daniel in a panic. Victoria had apparently instructed her to find a baker, any baker, with a recognizable name, even if it meant looking in the neighboring state. Patris said Victoria accused her of not having the right connections, Daniel relayed to me, shaking his head in disbelief. Victoria told her that her reputation was on the line. Patris is ready to quit. "She's unraveling," I murmured, feeling a surge of satisfaction that was as rich and complex as a dark chocolate ganache. "Completely," Daniel agreed. He paused, then added, "You know, I'm starting to think this isn't just bad luck. This secret client they all keep mentioning, they seem to have booked everyone I've ever heard of, and all at the exact same time. It's almost like it was done on purpose." He looked at me, a slow dawn of suspicion in his eyes. I met his gaze and gave him a tiny, conspiratorial wink. His jaw dropped slightly as the pieces began to click into place in his mind. "Leela, no way," he whispered. "You didn't." "Victoria wanted a professional," I said simply, turning back to my work. "I'm just ensuring she has the very best to choose from. It's a pity they're all so busy working for me." Daniel stared at me for a full minute, his expression shifting from disbelief to dawning comprehension, and finally to pure, unadulterated awe. He started to laugh, a deep, genuine belly laugh that filled the entire apartment. "Oh, man," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "I have never loved you more than I do in this moment. She is going to lose her mind." "That's the next step in the recipe," I said, my smile serene. "Let her simmer for a few more days. The panic will tenderize her pride." And as Daniel's laughter continued to ring through our home, I knew that the crack in our foundation had been repaired. We were a team, and our opponent was about to face her final checkmate. The simmer turned into a rolling boil. For 3 more days, a profound and telling silence emanated from Victoria's camp. No more frantic texts, no more angry calls. It was the eerie calm before a storm. The wedding was now just over a month away, a time frame in which booking a high-end cake artist is not just difficult, but laughable. Any real professional would be booked a year in advance. The silence was broken on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my kitchen, sketching the final design for what I now knew would be my own wedding cake, a 5-tiered masterpiece of cascading sugar flowers and delicate, hand-piped lace patterns. My phone buzzed on the stainless steel countertop. The screen read, "Victoria." I let it buzz, a small thrill shooting through me. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it buzzed again. I ignored it again. A third time. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep, steadying breath, and finally answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Leela speaking," I said, my voice perfectly level and professional. "Leela, finally." Victoria's voice was high and strained, stripped of its usual commanding cadence. It was thin, brittle, and fraying at the edges. "I've been calling, didn't you see?" "I'm sorry, Victoria, I've been with a client," I replied, which was technically true. I was my own client. "What can I do for you?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear her swallowing her pride. "It's the cake," she said, the words sounding like they were being physically pulled from her. "For the wedding, we've run into a bit of a snag." "Oh no," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured concern. "What happened?" "It's absurd," she huffed, a flash of her old self returning. "Every single reputable baker in this city, and I mean every single one, is unavailable. They're all booked for some ridiculous, top-secret corporate sponsorship. It's a complete monopoly. Someone has cornered the market." "That sounds stressful," I sympathized, adding a tiny, almost imperceptible brushstroke to my sketch. "It's a nightmare," she wailed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "The wedding is next month. What are we going to do? We can't have a wedding without a cake. It's humiliating." Ah, I thought, there it is, the real fear. Not the lack of dessert, but the presence of humiliation. "I don't know what to do, Leela," she continued, her voice cracking. "Patris, the planner, she quit. She said I was being unreasonable. Daniel is no help at all. He just keeps saying he told me so. I'm at the end of my rope." I waited, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. This was the moment. She had to be the one to ask. She had to be the one to say the words. "So, I was thinking," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I know I said some things at dinner. I was stressed. I get a little crazy when I'm planning events. You know how it is." "I do," I said. "And your baking, it's lovely. It really is. It's so charming." I stiffened. Charming. Still, she couldn't bring herself to say professional. The word was stuck in her throat, choked by her own arrogance. This wasn't enough. "Victoria," I said, my voice losing its sympathetic edge and taking on a cool, businesslike tone. "What is it you are asking me?" Another painful pause. I need you to make the cake," she finally choked out. "Please, Leela, I'm begging you, we have no other options. You're our only hope." The words were everything I had waited to hear. Begging, only hope. It was a complete reversal of the power dynamic, a total surrender. The little hobbyist had become the last resort, the savior. I looked at my beautiful, complex cake sketch. I thought about the contract with my name on it. I thought about the weeks of humiliation and the quiet strength I had found in its wake. It was time to pull back the curtain. "Victoria," I began slowly, "I understand your predicament, but I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. I'm not sure I can help you either." "What? Why not?" she cried, her voice escalating into panic. "Don't you have time? I'll pay you. I'll pay you double whatever you normally charge." "It's not about time or money," I said calmly. "You see, I'm also very busy these next few weeks. I'm afraid I'm committed to a rather large corporate client." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was a silence so profound, so dense with dawning horror, that I could feel it through the phone. She was connecting the dots, the terrible, humiliating dots. What client?" she whispered. And then I delivered the final, fatal blow. "The one who's sponsoring the new season of the Great National Baking Show," I said, my voice as smooth as buttercream. "The secret client who booked every professional in the city. That's me." The silence that followed my revelation was a living thing. I could hear the faint sound of Victoria's breathing, shallow and ragged, as her entire reality tilted on its axis. The PR executive, the master of narratives, had just been handed a story so humbling, so utterly comprehensive in its reversal of fortune, that she had no idea how to spin it. "You," she finally whispered, the word a puff of air, devoid of all its earlier conviction. That's not possible." Why not, Victoria? I asked, my voice still quiet, still calm. Because I work from a kitchen instead of a storefront. Because I don't have a fancy French name. Because my work is a hobby. I let the word hang in the air between us, a stark reminder of her own dismissive verdict. I could picture her perfectly, standing in her sterile, magazine-worthy apartment, her perfectly composed world crumbling around her. She, the arbiter of status, had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and outclassed by the very person she had deemed unworthy. "The great national baking show, they sponsored you?" she stammered, the disbelief warring with the undeniable truth of her situation. All the rejections, the identical excuses from every baker, it all made a horrifying kind of sense now. "They did," I confirmed. "Eleanor Vance has been my mentor for years. They were looking for a new kind of partner, someone authentic. Apparently, my little hobby has a rather significant national following." I didn't say it with malice, but with a simple, declarative finality. It was a statement of fact, one she could no longer ignore. There was another long pause, filled with what I could only imagine was a frantic recalculation of everything she thought she knew about me. The quiet girl who baked cute cakes was, in fact, a titan in her industry, a power player who could command the entire city's culinary talent with a checkbook and a vision. When she spoke again, her voice was different. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out, shell-shocked monotone. "So, you did this on purpose." It wasn't a question, it was a realization. "You let me make a fool of myself. You let me run around the city, begging, knowing I would find nothing." "You made your own choices, Victoria," I countered, my voice hardening slightly. "You chose to publicly humiliate me. You chose to disrespect my life's work in front of my fiancé, your brother. You could have had a magnificent wedding cake, made with love, for free. But you decided that my love and my work weren't good enough. You valued the name on the box more than what was inside it. This isn't my revenge, Victoria. This is the consequence of your own actions." I heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a sound that I had never, ever heard from my sister-in-law, a sob. It was a wrenching, defeated sound. "You're right," she choked out, the admission clearly tearing at her. "I'm so sorry, Leela. I was awful. I was a snob. I was jealous." The confession shocked me more than anything else. Jealous. Jealous of what? I asked, genuinely confused. "Ed, you have everything." "I have things," she corrected, her voice thick with emotion. "I have a nice apartment and a fancy title. You have a passion. You've built something real from scratch with your own two hands, something that people love. I just manage other people's creations. I make things look good on the surface. You are the substance. I'm sorry. I am so sorry." The apology, so raw and unexpected, disarmed me completely. My plan had been to savor my victory, to watch her pride crumble. But hearing her own self-awareness, her own pain, changed the equation. This was no longer about winning. It was about what came next. "What do you want, Leela?" she asked, her voice small. "I'll do anything. I'll tell everyone what I did. I'll grovel." I looked down at the sketch of the wedding cake. My wedding cake, Daniel's wedding cake, a symbol of our union. "I will make the cake," I said, my decision solidifying in that instant. "It will be the most beautiful cake I have ever made. But yes, there are conditions." "Anything," she repeated. "First," I said, "you will tell Daniel what you just told me. He needs to hear it from you. Second, at my bridal shower, you will stand up and you will tell our friends and family that you misjudged me, that you are proud to have me as a sister, and that I am the real professional who is making the wedding cake." "Okay," she whispered without hesitation. "And third," I added, "you will never, ever call my work a hobby again." "Never," she promised, her voice filled with a sincerity I had never heard from her before. "I promise, Leela, thank you." When I hung up the phone, the kitchen was quiet. The war was over. And in a way, we had both won. Victoria had been humbled and I had been vindicated. But more than that, a bridge had been built where there was once only a chasm, built not of pride or victory, but of a difficult, painful, and ultimately necessary truth. True to her word, Victoria called Daniel that evening. He later told me it was the most honest conversation he'd ever had with his sister. She cried, she apologized, and she admitted her own insecurities, not just about me, but about her own life. Daniel, in turn, forgave her, but reaffirmed his loyalty to me, telling her that we were a team, now and always. A fundamental crack in their family dynamic had been sealed. 2 weeks later, at my bridal shower, amidst a sea of pastel ribbons and happy chatter, Victoria stood up, champagne flute in hand. Her voice didn't waver as she looked directly at me. "I'd like to make a toast," she began, quieting the room. "To my future sister-in-law, Leela. When I first met Leela, I saw her passion for baking, but I foolishly failed to see the incredible strength, talent, and professionalism behind it. I made a mistake, and I am deeply sorry for it." She smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "I have since been educated. Leela is not just a baker, she is an artist and an inspiration. I am so incredibly proud to call her my sister. And I am honored that the most talented professional I know has agreed to make the cake for her own wedding. To Leela." The room erupted in applause. I met her eyes across the room and raised my glass. It was more than I could have asked for. The wedding was perfect. It was a beautiful autumn day, and as I walked down the aisle toward Daniel, I saw our cake standing in the reception hall. It was 5 tiers of ivory buttercream, adorned with a cascade of handcrafted sugar flowers in shades of blush, cream, and gold. It was, without a doubt, the best work I had ever done. It was a monument not to my victory, but to our new beginning. When the time came to cut the cake, Daniel and I stood before it, hand in hand. Victoria came over and gave me a quiet hug. "It's a masterpiece," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you." The story, of course, got out. A few of the guests who knew about the Great National Baking Show sponsorship put 2 and 2 together. My quiet power play became something of a legend in the local event planning community. After the show aired, with Leela's Flower Garden featured prominently as its proud sponsor, my little online bakery exploded. We were no longer a local secret, but a national brand. I had to hire a full-time staff of 10 just to handle the influx of orders. But the sweetest victory wasn't the fame or the success. It was the newfound peace in our family. Victoria became my staunchest ally, my most vocal supporter. She used her PR genius to help me navigate my new public profile, and I, in turn, made sure she always had the best cake at her fancy events. We found a balance, a genuine friendship forged in the fires of a conflict that could have torn us apart, but instead brought us all closer. Sometimes, standing in my now massive commercial kitchen, directing a team of talented bakers, I think back to that tense dinner. I think about being called a hobbyist, and I smile, because sometimes the most satisfying successes are the ones that no one, not even you, ever sees coming. They are the ones that are born from hurt, rise with resolve, and are frosted with the sweet, sweet taste of vindication.